If you live in the United States, you've probably heard stories about abandoned hospitals. But the story I'm about to tell you is different. People say that what happened inside this hospital was never fully documented in any official report. This is the story of Ravenwood Memorial Hospital, a large hospital built just outside Helena, Montana. Today, the building sits abandoned. But decades ago, it was one of the busiest hospitals in the region. Hundreds of patients came through its doors every single day. My name is Jack Miller. I'm a documentary researcher. I specialize in forgotten medical cases, abandoned institutions, and unsolved historical mysteries. About 2 years ago, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was an old black and white photograph. 3 doctors were standing in front of the hospital's main entrance. On the back of the photo, someone had written just one sentence: "Find room 214 before someone else does." At first, I thought it was some kind of prank, but there was something else inside the envelope, a torn page from a doctor's journal. The date read October 12th, 1964. And at the bottom was one name, Dr. Harold Grant. The page contained only one sentence. The 3rd procedure was successful. The patient remembers nothing. That was it. No explanation. No patient name. Nothing. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I spent the next several weeks digging through newspaper archives, county records, old library files, and medical documents. Most of the records had disappeared. But I eventually found an interview with a retired journalist. He said something that caught my attention immediately. Back in the 1960s, strange rumors surrounded Ravenwood Memorial Hospital. Families claimed their loved ones went in for routine treatment. But when they came home, they weren't the same people anymore. Some no longer recognized their own families. Others had completely lost their memories. And a few were never seen again. Official records listed every case as something different: missing paperwork, medical complications, mental illness. But none of the explanations seemed to fit. At first, I assumed they were just local legends, until I found someone who had actually worked there, a retired nurse named Mary Collins. When I showed her the photograph, her hands immediately began to shake. She looked at me and quietly asked, "Who told you about room 214? I froze. She stared at the photograph for several seconds before speaking again. "Those 3 doctors only worked the night shift. Dr. Harold Grant, Dr. Stephen Brooks, Dr. Alan Pierce. During the day, the hospital was completely normal. But after midnight, the entire 4th floor was locked." I asked her, "What happened up there?" She stayed silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "We were never allowed inside. But every night, we could hear strange machines running. And every morning, some patients' names had disappeared from the records." I looked at her and asked, "Did you ever see what was inside room 214? She took a deep breath, then nodded. "Once, I accidentally opened the door. What I saw inside made me resign that very same day." "What did you see?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulled out a small rusted key, and placed it in my hand. "If you really want the truth, go to Ravenwood Memorial Hospital. But remember one thing: if room 214 is already open, don't go inside." Without another word, she stood up, walked out of the room, and never looked back. That night, I made my decision. The next morning, I was going to Ravenwood Memorial Hospital. What I didn't know was that a 50-year-old secret was still waiting for someone to find it. The next morning, I stood in front of the main entrance to Ravenwood Memorial Hospital. The massive iron gate was covered in rust, and an old sign still hung above it. Closed since 1981. The entire place was silent. A cold wind drifted through the broken windows, creating a high-pitched whistle that echoed across the empty halls. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old key, the same key Mary Collins had given me. Then I stepped inside. The hospital lobby was buried under years of dust. Old wheelchairs sat abandoned across the floor, and the reception clock was still frozen at 2:17 a.m. I switched on my camera and made my way toward the 4th floor. With every step, the silence grew heavier. A few minutes later, I found a door. Almost everything on it was covered in dust, except for one number, 214. This was the room mentioned in the diary, the photographs, and by Mary herself. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the lock. Click. It opened on the very first try. The room was completely dark. I swept my flashlight across the walls. An old medical chair stood in the center. Along one wall were several steel filing cabinets, packed with hundreds of patient records. I opened the first file. Patient number 47. Below it was a handwritten note. Memory response test, stage 3. I opened another file, then another. Almost every file contained the same type of experiment, but none of them explained what had happened to the patients afterward. Then, behind one of the cabinets, I noticed a small steel box. Inside was an old reel-to-reel tape and a handwritten note. If this recording ever reaches someone, make sure the truth is finally told. I found an old tape recorder and pressed play. For several seconds, all I heard was static. Then, a man's voice broke through the noise. "My name is Dr. Alan Pierce. If you're hearing this, it means we failed." I held my breath. We were never treating patients. We were trying to rewrite human memory. It wasn't the government, and it wasn't some secret organization. This was our own ambition. We wanted to prove that the most painful memories could be erased. But after every experiment, the patients lost more than their pain. Some forgot their families. Some forgot how to speak. And some never became themselves again. The recording suddenly stopped. Silence filled the room once more. Then, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from the hallway. I rushed outside. No one was there, only a long, empty corridor, with shattered light fixtures hanging from the ceiling. When I turned back, room 214 was slowly closing by itself. I ran toward the door and grabbed it before it shut. But when I looked inside, every single file was gone. The room was almost empty, as if nothing had ever been there. The only thing left in my hands was the old tape. I left the hospital that day and never went back. A few weeks later, I made copies of the recording and mailed them to several journalists. One by one, every single one of them gave me the same answer. We never received any recording. To this day, the original tape is still locked away in my possession. Many people say it's nothing more than a story. Maybe they're right. Or maybe some truths are so terrifying that the world simply refuses to believe them. And if you ever find yourself inside an abandoned hospital and you see room 214, remember one thing. Not every locked door was meant to be opened.